Hey guys, welcome to another video. My name's Ian. Welcome back to the channel, Ian the Reader. Today I have something a little bit different for you. I'm going to be doing a very long reading vlog talking about my thoughts on The Dark Tower 7, the final book in the Dark Tower series by Sai King. I'm going to be vlogging my thoughts and feelings as I'm reading it. This is actually at the end. I've already finished it, but you're about to see all my thoughts throughout reading it. Very excited about it, but I did just want to hop in and tell you that this is going to be a spoiler-filled video. There's no way around it to really get my thoughts on this book as I'm going through it. I have to talk spoilers. I will at some point do a should you read the Dark Tower series video, as well as a ranking and a recommended reading order for The Dark Tower with all of the other Sai King books that I've read included in that. But this video specifically will be spoiler filled, so prepare yourself for that. Yeah, let me know in the comments if you have read the series and what your thoughts are on the finale, because I have so many thoughts and I'm excited for you to see them. But yeah, at the very beginning, just want to know, have you read The Dark Tower? Do you like it? If not, do you plan on reading it, or will you please give it a second chance, because I think it's worth it. But yeah, that's it for the spoiler-free section. We're going to jump into the vlog now, but thanks so much for tuning in, and yeah, enjoy the show. Hey everyone, editing Ian here. So, I've finished the book now, but originally, before starting the book, I had filmed my predictions for what I thought was going to happen, and I referenced my predictions periodically throughout the rest of the footage. And I guess I deleted that because as I'm trying to edit this whole video, I cannot find that video anywhere. So I'm going to tell you what my predictions were from what I can remember, because I went pretty in detail and I'm really bummed that that footage is gone. But I'm going to tell you the predictions I had that I can remember. So here we go. First, in reference to all of the characters, my original prediction was, as far as like who would live and who would die, that Callahan would die, because he obviously, like, he was supposed to be dead already. He kind of had his redemption arc throughout this series from everything that happened in Salem's Lot, and so I thought he would die, but I thought it would be kind of later on, like in an effort to get everybody to the tower. I thought he would definitely be around for a while and ultimately would end up sacrificing himself. I did think he'd probably be the first to die, though, and I thought the original quartet would make it further than that. Now, as far as other predictions I had regarding the quartet, I thought they would all make it to the tower, and I thought that many of them would die at the tower. Specifically, I thought that Eddie would definitely die. He was one of my predictions. I didn't think that Susanna would die. I don't know why I was so strongly believing that Susanna would die. I did think that Roland might die. Here was like a prediction that I had, and I talk about it later. And it was one that I kind of was toying with, and eventually, like, as the book was progressing, it kind of developed more so. But I predicted that Roland might die, and that Jake might ultimately take on the role of the gunslinger in the story. And ultimately, I thought that the story would kind of end where it began, with the line, the man in black flees across the desert and the gunslinger follows, or whatever that line is, just because it's such an iconic line, and I've heard that the ending of this series is very controversial, and so I thought that maybe it was like a time loop thing, and that's very much hinted at throughout the whole series, is that the gunslinger and the man in black will forever be on this like journey and chasing each other and surrounding the tower and all that jazz. So I predicted that. As far as other predictions go, I didn't necessarily know if the tower was like a legitimate physical thing, because he hasn't actually gotten to the tower yet. And so I was like, what if the Dark Tower is actually not like real, like a physical tower? But that was a prediction I had. I did predict that maybe Sai King would make another appearance in the book. I didn't know. I thought he was dead, so I thought maybe they'd try to like go, because the way that book 6 ends is like he's died in that article, it says. So I thought maybe they'd try to go to a different Earth and talk to King again or something like that. I wasn't sure how that would go. And then of course the baby has been born, and he's predicted to be the one who kills Roland. So I thought that that's what would happen, is that Mordred the baby would kill Roland and Jake would kind of take his place, if that makes sense. So those were pretty much all the predictions I had, I think, off the top of my head. Yeah, again, I wish this was more like in the moment authentic, because it was probably like a 10-minute clip of me going into all my thoughts and stuff, but oh well, these things happen. So those were my predictions. Now we're going to go ahead and jump into the very beginning, which I believe has some thoughts about Callahan. So let's cut to the footage. Okay. Callahan did not last long at all. Okay, so I'm on my way home from work. I read the first chapter, like the first 20 pages on my lunch, and Callahan is dead. Which I'm sad about. I really like Callahan a lot. But I did not expect him to go so soon. I did call that he was going to die. I thought he would make it further. But that whole first intro was crazy, edge of your seat, really, really intense. So I really like the way this book is starting off. No time to waste. Callahan died so fast, though. That was crazy. So I guess, and also the turtle thing is no longer the picture it said. So I was curious how that would kind of play into the last book, but I guess it's not that important. I mean, it saved Jake ultimately, but what are you gonna do? So yeah, okay. I have the audiobook though, so I'm about to listen to it on my way home. We'll see what happens. Hopefully nobody else dies right off the bat. Let's go. Okay, so it's now a day later, and I have finished part 1 of this book. And just a few thoughts. I don't want to spend too long on this because this video is going to be way too long already anyway. But yeah, so after having finished part 1, 2 things I really liked. I really liked all the stuff with Kara Laughs, that whole thing, because I was like, why does that sound familiar? And so I looked it up, and that's when I found out that it's the twinner of Sarah Laughs, which is in Bag of Bones, which, great, now there's something good about Bag of Bones, the ties to the Dark Tower, because otherwise that novel is not great, not my favorite. Do not like Bag of Bones very much. But yeah, so that was kind of interesting, and all the stuff that happened there was really cool. And then, oh my gosh, the reunion. It was very emotional for me. I was really taken aback by how impactful that was, and it really shows me how much I love these characters and their relationships. Eddie and Susanna coming back together was nice. It was sweet. But it was really Jake and Roland, their reunion. Oh, man. When Jake calls him father, and he's like, is that what you want me to be? And he's like, yes. And then Roland, like, holds his arms out like he doesn't know if he's doing the right thing. But then Jake comes and, like, lets him hug him. And then the final line of that, my father came for me. Oh, it was just so good. It was so heartwarming. And, man, I just love Jake and Roland's dynamic so much. And there's even that moment where Jake is like, he sacrificed me once for the tower and he may do it again, but he's so important to me. And wow, it was just very emotionally impactful. And if we get any more moments like that in this book, then I don't know how, I mean, unless King really ruins the ending, I don't know how I could not give this 5 stars. But one of my favorite moments of the whole series so far. So very excited about that, very excited to keep going. I actually read that earlier today, and I stopped because I wanted to get my thoughts out there a little bit before I moved on to part 2. But that's where we're at. So that means I'm now, like 170 pages into this volume here. So not very much, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's a lot. But yeah, we're on part 2 now. I'm very excited and very scared. But yeah, check back in a little bit. Okay, so I'm about to go into Half Price Books and do some book shopping. However, I'm listening to the book, and Ted Brodigan from Hearts in Atlantis just showed up, and it was so random. Like, I didn't see it coming at all until he pops up, and he's like, Bobby Garfield, is that you? And he's talking to Jake. Well, I guess Jake looks like him, so maybe he's like the twinner of Bobby Garfield. But like, oh my gosh, I love the way this book is just like finally bringing together all of these threads that have been like connected to this series throughout all these other books. They're finally all like coming to fruition. We're finally seeing all these characters and everything. So really love that Ted is here. I loved Ted in Hearts in Atlantis. I'm very excited to see what happens next. So yeah, just wanted to check in there. I'm gonna go do some book shopping. Forgive me if I look sweaty, because I am. I just helped my grandma move house. But I have some catching up to do on my discussion of the book, because I have been listening to this audiobook and doing a lot of that while I'm driving, so it's kind of hard to just stop and get my thoughts on stuff, especially since like it's when I'm driving on the highway, so it kind of sounds loud. So I thought I'd go ahead and hop on now and just get some of my thoughts. A lot has happened. I have about 5 or 6 hours left in the audiobook, And dadgummit, the emotions of this book are crazy, man. So just to backtrack, the quartet was together and they sensed Kashum, I think that's what it was called, that the quartet was about to break, and it did. My Eddie Dean, my boy, he is dead, and that hurt a lot. I thought that would be it. I didn't think that Stephen King was gonna hurt anybody else, at least not until we got to like the very end. And then frickin' Jake, man, that was the really emotional part. Eddie hurt, but I kind of, like, I think in my predictions, I thought that Eddie was gonna die. Jake, I thought, because he had already died beforehand, twice, actually, technically, I thought that maybe he would live here. But, oh my gosh, that whole part was emotional, where they're chasing down, trying to find Stephen King and to save his life, and Jake knows that one of them is going to die. And then at the end, when Roland tries to be the one to jump in front of the vehicle, but his hip gives out, and then Jake just throws himself in front of the car. Oh my gosh. And just Jake's transformation, the way he is like fully in, or was in, on being a gunslinger and part of this quartet, like he's developed so much as a character. But really it was just Roland and Jake's relationship was one of the most fantastic things about this whole story. I love the quartet and their whole bond, all of them, but Jake and Roland, that father-son bond that they developed, it's just like so moving. And so for Roland to have to let Jake die, and then also for him not to actually technically be there when Jake did die because he has to talk to Stephen King, that was so painful for him. And so painful for me as well. So I was very, very, very upset about all that. I'm still not over it. That whole Jake's death was just very traumatic and very emotionally impactful. That being said, this book is incredible. Let me go back though. So I will say the only thing that I'm kind of dissatisfied in is the actual moment of them saving the beam was a little bit lackluster for me, the way it kind of happened in the middle of the book, and it just seemed to happen very quickly. And I guess that's not fully the climax of Roland's stories, where like, yeah, the beam is saved, but they still clearly have more to do with the Dark Tower itself. Although people keep trying to discourage them from actually going to the Dark Tower, which, you know, obviously is a sign that they need to go. But yeah, that part was a little bit lackluster, but it's been building up so much. Where I'm at now, Roland and Susanna have been traveling throughout the wastes to get to the Dark Tower, and it's cold and they're hungry, and they just got tempted by the 3 Stephen Kings. That whole scene was so good. And I love those moments in the series. Really, it starts taking place like late book 3, but especially in like Wolves of the Kala and Song of Susanna, and now in this book, where the quartet, or whichever members of the quartet are there, they're just like fully in line with each other and with Ka. Like there's that moment where one of the Stephen Kings, I don't even remember, they're like called Foom, I don't remember what they're called, but he tries to whip out a gun and kill them, and Susanna and Roland, like, it's like without even a word, they both knew, they sensed it, and they moved together and they took care of business. And like those moments are just so cool for me, seeing the way they're just connected, and the way they take care of business. It's so cool. So yeah, I'm at the part now where it's them traveling together, and they're just getting closer and closer to the tower. The watch has just now started to slow down, that he has received, so they're sensing now that they're getting closer to the tower. So I'm very excited. I honestly, at this point, I'm wondering if everyone dies but Roland. Maybe Roland dies too. I don't think Roland's gonna die. I think one of them will be left. I'll actually say that. Maybe Roland will die and Susanna will be the only one left, but there's another part of me that thinks that, just like it was foretold that anyone who walks with the Gunslinger will die, Susanna might die and it'll just be Roland left. And maybe he'll be trapped in the tower with the Crimson King. Maybe my theory about like time, because it did say that Ka is a wheel, and so maybe that'll end up repeating himself, and he's just like connected to Ka and to the Dark Tower in such a way that he never really dies. Maybe that'll happen. I actually thought for a minute there was a moment early on when Roland was talking about Kashum, or whatever it's called, and how he sensed that one of them was going to die, and it said something about like how it never crossed his mind that it would be him that died. And I thought that was foreshadowing that he would be the one to die, and ultimately it ended up being Eddie and then Jake. But when that happened, I thought, oh, maybe Roland will die, and this whole father-son thing with Jake will be Jake kind of steps up and becomes the new Roland, and then at the very end of the series, would be like the man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed, but Jake would be the gunslinger, not Roland. Clearly that's not what happened because Jake is now dead, but that was a theory I had, and I would have really liked that. So now instead my heart is broken, Jake is dead, Eddie is dead. Yeah, so that's where we're at there. I also find it interesting how there's random spoilers for like so many other Stephen King books throughout the story. So Insomnia obviously was spoiled because as I was reading it, there's a moment where literally Roland gets handed a copy of the book Insomnia by Stephen King and is told like to read it because it has important things for him to know about the Dark Tower. And part of me at first, because I'm thinking about doing like a recommended reading order for this series once I'm done, because there's so many like other books you should read in addition to the main books. And part of me thought about saying like read up to this point of the Dark Tower 7 and then read Insomnia. But when he's handed the book, it spoils what happens to some of the characters in it. So I definitely think reading Insomnia, like maybe between books 6 and 7, is a great placement. But you can't do the thing that I was thinking. But yeah, Insomnia spoiled. There's like a little spoiler for Carrie. I think there's also a spoiler for, not Bag of Bones. I don't know. It's just, there's tons of them littered throughout. Thus far, I've not been spoiled for anything that I haven't read yet, because I feel like I've read most of the essential stuff to have read for the Dark Tower, but we'll see if that ends up happening. But I'm getting very, very close. I think I might actually finish it today. So we'll see. Maybe I'll check in again, or maybe I'll just check in at the end. So I'm excited. I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't believe I'm almost at the end of this very, very long journey, just like Roland is. So yeah, here we go. Okay, I'm in the drive-thru for food, and the Dandelo just appeared or revealed himself, and it said that his face turned into that of like a terrifying clown or something. It's Pennywise. What? I'm upset again. Okay, Susan is gone. That was like very bitter sweet. I mean, it's good that she survived, but she left him, you know. And I guess like Ka was telling her that she needed to go because she kept having those dreams and stuff, but she just abandoned Roland. Maybe, I mean, I guess she would have died if she'd stayed, but that's not what makes me sad. I was a little bit upset about that. But then frickin' Oi, man. Oi's death. It was so brutal. Oh, man, I was just sitting there, like, with my mouth open, saying, no, 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 no. And it happened. Which I should have, expected and seen coming. But, Oi, really? Really? So, yeah. I'm very close to the end. I will finish it tonight. But I'm on chapter 3 of this part, which is the Crimson King and the Dark Tower. So we are in the end game. I'm scared. Here we go. Hello, everyone. It has now been a few weeks since I finished the Dark Tower, and I have thoughts. I finished it, and I was just rattled, and I felt that I needed to distance myself a little bit from the finishing chapters of this book before I could really give my full thoughts. So here I am, probably 2.5 weeks after finishing, and I have those thoughts. Let's talk about it. So, upon first finishing this book, I was mixed on my overall feelings on the actual finale. I will say, book as a whole, series as a whole, I immediately loved. And I respected all that King had done, and I was in awe of the grandeur of the final book, as well as the emotional beats. Like, my gosh, very, very emotional, the whole last book. That being said, I had some mixed feelings about a couple things. First off, all of Mordred. Oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure Mordred is his name. The baby, or not even a baby because he grows a lot, but Roland and Susanna and the Red King's child. I thought that ultimately he was going to play a bigger role in things. It seems like, I mean, obviously Oi had his sacrifice, which, oh my gosh, the emotions. But other than that, you know, his whole final moments were slightly underwhelming. I thought he was going to really possibly even kill Roland, and at first I thought maybe he would kill Roland and Jake would be the one who kind of takes over the gunslinger, the lone gunslinger role, as he's like, you know, the Gunslinger's son, and all that. And so I thought maybe that would happen, but then once Jake died, I really didn't know what direction it was going to go in. But yeah, I was a little disappointed in that, and then I was a little disappointed in the Red King, because he really, or the Crimson King, I keep calling him the Red King because they call him that as well. But the Crimson King, I was really just a little bit let down by the fact that, oh my gosh, he's this great big threat, and he just gets like stuck at the top of the tower, and ultimately it's Patrick that is able to defeat him with his gifts and abilities. And then there's, of course, the ending of Roland going up the Dark Tower and then ending up right back where he started, which I did call, like, beat for beat, almost, the way it ends with that first line. And it's foreshadowed a lot throughout the series, so I don't, like, pat myself on the back too much on that. I do on, like, the last line, but I think part of that is just because how much people talk about that first line of the book. I felt like maybe there was a little bit more going on. Like, it's an epic line to begin with. But I just had a feeling, and sure enough, I was right. But yeah, I was fine with that, because it felt right, and I called it. But yeah, I definitely wasn't sure on all of my other feelings. Aside from that, I was really pleased. I loved so much of the book. I was fully entertained, fully engaged the whole time. I thought the pacing was excellent. And then Susanna's ending was so moving. Just her going to this alternate version of reality and finding Jake and Eddie and them getting to be together in some way. It was beautiful. So beautiful. Despite the fact that the Eddie and Jake that I know and that she knew died, it was still very heartwarming. So I was grateful for that. I loved that. That was perfect. But all those other things I felt kind of mixed on. That being said, I've watched a lot of videos and I've thought about it a long time, and I have some theories. So let's talk about those theories. So there's this idea of the perpetual nature of the Gunslinger's journey in this book. How he just continues to repeat over and over and over again, traveling to the Dark Tower and such. Except that there are slight differences that occur. For example, the Horn of Eld at the very end, in this new recurrence of the story, he has the Horn of Eld, and in the past he was too upset and driven by his desire for the tower to pick up the Horn of Eld when I think it was Cuthbert died. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, he didn't have it in that previous iteration of his journey to the tower, but now he does. So we see from that there are little changes that occur. And so I think ultimately that is a sign that slowly but surely Roland is headed towards a fate that is not as dismal as he just continues to go through this cycle. And let me defend that a little bit, because the whole reason he didn't get the Horn of Eld to begin with is because he was so driven by his desire for the tower. The fact that in this iteration he had enough control of himself to resist that urge for the tower long enough to get the Horn of Eld means he's kind of like loosening his grip on this intense mission drive for the tower, in my opinion. And I think that we also kind of see some other reflections of that as well. For example, in the past, and it's not, this is just like my interpretation of it for sure. But with it, I feel like in past versions, maybe Roland wasn't allowing people to get in as close as he did in the one that we experienced in the books, with his quartet, with Jake, with Eddie, with all these things. There are moments where you kind of see him loosen his grip on the tower a little bit, even throughout that, like how originally he just let Jake fall to his death in The Gunslinger, but at the end he had so much more conflict with that. So clearly he is growing in his humanity and letting go of the tower a little bit. And I have this theory that maybe in past iterations, it's like the thing that I've been thinking about a lot is Oi, because there's this moment where Oi chooses to stay with Roland rather than leaving with Susanna, and that felt like a moment that could have gone either way. And part of me was thinking, I wonder if in previous iterations Roland didn't, or Oi didn't stay with Roland, but because of Roland's character and how much he's cared for these people, now Oi stays with him. And so there are these slight moments that I feel like are different now than they were in previous iterations. And I feel like also Oi staying is what allowed him to survive Mordred, because ultimately if Oi hadn't been there, Mordred might have killed Roland in that moment, like he was destined to, or what have you. And so that's kind of been my thought process on it. And so now that he has the Horn of Eld, my thought is, okay, this is one step closer to him escaping this perpetual desire and chasing of the tower. And so not saying that this will be the last time he does it, but it could be, because he's one step closer, and I feel like there's been a long process of him getting closer that we didn't necessarily see, because this has happened over and over and over and over again. So that's kind of my thoughts on the whole Roland thing, that I do think eventually he's going to escape the tower. I don't know when it'll be, especially because people consistently were telling him, like, look, you did your job. You stopped the beam from being destroyed. The only reason you're going after the tower is because that's what you want. And so I don't think he necessarily has to. I think it's his fate to continue to do that, because he won't let himself just let it go. Even like when they get to the tower and they stop the Crimson King, he didn't have to go in the tower. It was his own fault. It was his own desire, his crutch of, I have to see the tower, that led him to that point. So I think eventually he will get past it, but that's just something that I'm assuming. That's my interpretation of it. Some people think that he's in hell or whatever, and that he is just going to continuously go after the tower over and over again into infinity. I think because of the slight changes that are happening, that we see, and the fact that he's getting further away from the tower in that, I think ultimately one day he's going to escape. But it may be a while. So there you go. So those are my thoughts on that. The other thing I really had some big thoughts on, like I said, was Mordred and then the Crimson King. So the whole Mordred thing, I already talked about how maybe in previous iterations he had a bigger role to play in Roland's fate, but because Oy was there, Oy protected him from that. And that's just my interpretation. I completely understand if people aren't satisfied by that, because yeah, I really wanted to see a big confrontation between the two of them, but I've let that go. And then there is the Crimson King, which I really feel, I can't remember which video I saw about this. I'll try to find some of the videos I watched and link them down below so you can watch them too. But basically, there is, it's it puts the Crimson King in his place, because he's this big baddie or whatever, and he thinks he's going to destroy the tower and da-da-da, but then when he tries to go up the tower, he literally just gets locked out, and he is powerless in that moment. And I think that just kind of shows the indifference of the tower, to not only the Crimson King, but also to Roland, in some ways, how they're so focused on taking it down, but it is this powerful thing that is so beyond them that it just locks out the Crimson King, and ultimately it's just their own ideations of their role to play, that give them a sense of importance and grandeur, and that kind of takes the thunder out of that moment for the Crimson King, and he's literally just stuck out there throwing snitches at Roland and Patrick. So I was kind of amused by that when I kind of thought about it more. Again, I would have liked a little bit more of a head-to-head confrontation between the Crimson King and Roland, but at the same time, these battles have been happening over and over and over again, and in some ways, the Crimson King himself has used so many different people through so many different stories, to have these big battle kind of moments. And so I think at the end, he's all alone. He's used his cronies, he's used different forms, he's done this and that and this and that, and used so many other people. It's like the king in chess, how the Crimson King is literally the king on the chessboard, and yeah, he's the one you have to stop to win, but at the same time, he can literally only move one space at a time. He doesn't have that much power on his own. It's the queen and the bishop and all of his other minions who are expendable, and aren't the way to win the game, but at the same time, he himself is kind of powerless. So that's kind of my interpretation of that, and through that, I've kind of enjoyed it more. And so those are kind of my qualms that I had and how I've processed them. Overall, though, just kind of giving some overall thoughts on the book, I think that this was pretty dang near perfect. I think that it was the most wonderful, thorough, in-depth way to bring this emotional journey and physical journey to an end. I was really satisfied with all of the emotional moments with the quartet, with Eddie and Susan and Jake, or Susanna and Jake and Roland and Oy, and even Callahan and the guy from Hearts in Atlantis, which is now slipping my mind, Tet. Yeah, I loved all of those moments, and the journey to the tower was so grueling and so painful and so long, but it really made me feel the stakes of the story as well. So I really did appreciate that, and ultimately, I don't think Stephen King could have done a better job wrapping this up. This was my favorite book of the Dark Tower series, which is, I think, a hot take. I think people like The Drawing of the Three or The Wastelands the most, but the final book was my favorite. And so I'll do a ranking at some point, but this was definitely my favorite book of the Dark Tower series. And as of right now, I need it to sit with me even longer, but it is in my top 3 books by Stephen King overall, and that's with me having read like 45 Stephen King books. But the longer I sit with this, and especially on a reread, I could see these books going up. So I do plan on rereading these books very soon. I'm actually planning on reading The Gunslinger probably in the next month or so, because I feel like it's the perfect way to end this series with kind of the way it starts back at the beginning, just reading it again and having fresh perspective on all of that. So really excited to do that. And I can't believe I'm done. I cannot believe it. So yeah, 5-star book, 5-star series, despite the fact that some of the books kind of go up and down in quality. From books 3 on, I loved them. And I think I'll enjoy books 1 and 2 a lot more on rereads. So yeah, that's my vlog for the Dark Tower series. It feels amazing to finally be done. And I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, because this has been the tower that I've been chasing for ages. And it's over. But yeah, after this, I'm definitely going to read some more books, because I didn't get all of the books connected to the Dark Tower. There's definitely some that I still need to circle back to. I was watching a video and somebody said that the Talisman and Black House are very connected to the tower, and I had not heard that before, so I definitely want to read those. I want to read Rose Matter, because I know that Roland kind of makes an appearance in there, maybe under a different name. I want to read Desperation and The Regulators. And who knows what else. But yeah, I'm really pleased to have done this. The Dark Tower was amazing. I loved it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you made it this far, please let me know what you thought of the Dark Tower, and the Dark Tower series. And if I'm alone in thinking this is the best book, or if you had mixed feelings, I want to hear all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly. I think all the opinions are valid. I'm not saying that it's perfect for everybody. I 100% understand why people might not like this book as much. But for me, I loved it so much. So thank you so much for watching. Hope that you enjoyed. I really appreciate your time. And yeah, that's it. Have a good one, guys. Bye.